"You can't close that road," the woman said, smiling like she had already won. 300 families depend on it. The diesel engine behind her kept growling, low and heavy, while a yellow road grater chewed into the shoulder of my property. Pine dust floated through the morning light. Fresh gravel snapped under my boots. Somewhere beyond the trees, the lake slapped softly against the dock of the cabin I had owned for exactly 9 days. I looked past her at the line of white SUVs waiting on the narrow road, then down at the rusted survey pin sticking out of the dirt beside my boot. Red ribbon. County stamp. My boundary. That sounds like a serious problem, I said. Her smile widened. "I'm glad you understand." I did understand. Better than she could possibly imagine. Because the road she was standing on did not belong to her HOA. It belonged to me. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 42 when I bought the old cedar cabin on Blackwater Lake, 2 hours north of Raleigh, North Carolina. After 18 years measuring property lines for construction companies, I had spent enough time watching other men build their dream homes. I wanted something quiet, a place where the loudest sound at night was wind moving through pine needles. The listing had been almost suspiciously simple. 2-bedroom lake cabin, private dock, 6 wooded acres, no HOA. Those final 3 words were the reason I drove up the same afternoon. No HOA meant no committees measuring my grass. No laminated notices taped to my door. No stranger deciding what color my boat shed should be. The cabin needed work, but I loved it immediately. The porch sagged half an inch on the east side. The chimney smelled like wet ash. An old brass bell hung beside the kitchen door, green with age. The previous owner, a retired teacher named Walter Briggs, told me his father had built the place in 1968 using timber cut from the property. "Only thing you need to watch," Walter said as we signed the papers, "is the road." I thought he meant winter ice. I should have asked more questions. On my 3rd morning there, I woke to the hiss of tires on wet gravel. 1 SUV became 5. 5 became 20. By 7:30, a steady river of vehicles was passing 30 yards from my porch. Golf carts, landscaping trucks, delivery vans. Every one of them disappeared through the trees toward a gated development called Cedar Ridge Estates. Their entrance sign stood nearly a mile away, polished stone surrounded by flowers, but their only usable road curved straight through the center of my newly purchased land. At first, I assumed there was an easement. Most rural properties had one. So I opened the closing folder, spread the survey across my kitchen table, and followed the black boundary line with my finger. The smell of old coffee and cedar filled the room. I checked once, then twice. No easement, no right-of-way, no shared access agreement. Nothing. The road was listed as a private gravel lane entirely contained within Parcel 17B. My parcel. That afternoon, I drove into Cedar Ridge and asked for the HOA office. That was where I met Vanessa Whitmore, 53, platinum blonde hair, cream pantsuit, white Range Rover, and the calm voice of someone who had spent years mistaking obedience for respect. She glanced at my deed for less than 3 seconds. "That road has served our community for decades," she said. "You can't just buy a cabin and disrupt established access." "I'm not trying to disrupt anything. I'm asking to see the recorded easement." Her fingers stopped tapping the desk. "Just for a second." Then she slid my deed back toward me. "Our attorney will contact you." The next morning, the grader arrived. Vanessa stood beside it with a clipboard, claiming the HOA was performing emergency road maintenance. They had cut 2 of my survey ribbons, removed a wooden boundary post, and widened the shoulder without permission. That was when I noticed something scratched into the back of the old brass bell hanging beside my cabin door. A parcel number, a date, and the name of a road that no longer appeared on any modern map. What Vanessa did not know was that I had spent my entire career finding boundaries people hoped had disappeared, and she had just handed me the reason to start digging. What would you do if an entire HOA discovered its only road crossed your land? And where are you watching from? Because this road was hiding more than a missing easement, and before Cedar Ridge was finished with me, their president would be begging for permission to drive home. The brass bell came off the wall with one hard pull and a shower of red cedar dust. I carried it inside, set it beneath the kitchen light, and wiped the tarnished metal with the sleeve of my work shirt. The engraving was shallow, almost erased by 50 years of weather. Blackwater Access Road, Parcel 17B, 1969. Beneath that sat 3 initials, HEC. I had seen enough old surveys to know that roads did not simply vanish. They were renamed, widened, abandoned, or quietly absorbed by people who assumed nobody would ever check. I opened my laptop and searched the county database, but Blackwater Access Road returned nothing. Cedar Ridge Drive appeared on maps from 1998 onward, curving through my land as if it had always belonged there. Before that, the digital records went blank. That kind of blank space usually meant the truth was still on paper. The next morning, I drove 40 minutes to the county records office. Rain tapped against the windshield, and wet pine branches scraped the sides of my truck as I left the cabin. Cedar Ridge traffic followed me all the way to the highway. Residents stared through their windows as they passed, some irritated, some curious, none aware that every tire was rolling across land they had no documented right to use. The records building smelled like dust, carpet glue, and old paper. A clerk named Denise led me to a basement room where oversized plat books sat inside steel cabinets. "Anything before 1985 won't be online," she said. "Developers hate hearing that." I told her I was not a developer. "Then you might actually read it," she replied. 2 hours later, my fingertips were black with graphite. I found the original 1968 plat for Walter's father, Henry Briggs. Parcel 17B included the cabin, the lake frontage, and a narrow logging trail labeled Blackwater Access Road. It ended at the northern property line. Beyond that point was timberland owned by a family named Whitmore. Vanessa's family. The first Cedar Ridge subdivision map appeared in 1996. It showed a new public entrance from the east, connected to the county highway. Blackwater Road remained private. Then I found a 2003 amendment signed by Cedar Ridge Development Corporation. Their eastern entrance had been closed after a retaining wall failure made the slope unstable. The developer began using Blackwater Road as a temporary emergency route while repairs were completed. Temporary. The word was typed in bold. The authorization lasted 90 days and required written permission from Henry Briggs. Attached was a handwritten agreement carrying his signature. It allowed construction trucks through the property until November 30th, 2003. No residents. No permanent access. No renewal. No easement. Yet the road had never closed. Someone had simply removed the temporary sign, paved over the logging trail, and let 23 years of routine create the appearance of ownership. I photographed every page. When I returned upstairs, Denise lowered her voice. "You should request the road maintenance invoices." "Why?" She glanced toward the hallway. "Because Cedar Ridge has been billing the county for that road." The words settled in my stomach like cold iron. If the HOA had claimed public reimbursement for maintaining a private road, this was no longer an argument about access. It was potential fraud. By the time I reached the cabin, the rain had stopped. Vanessa's white Range Rover was parked beside my porch. She stood under the brass bell's empty hook with 2 board members and a man in a navy suit. "Mr. Cole," she said, "this is our attorney, David Langley. We're prepared to offer you a generous solution." He handed me a folder. Inside was a proposed easement granting Cedar Ridge permanent access across my land for $1. In return, they promised not to sue me for obstructing community infrastructure. I looked at the wet tire tracks cutting through my grass, then at Vanessa's confident little smile. "You came here expecting my signature?" I asked. "We came here to prevent you from making an expensive mistake." I closed the folder and handed it back. "That mistake was made in 2003. Her smile twitched. "Just once." Then the grader's engine roared somewhere behind the trees. I turned toward the sound and saw fresh orange survey flags lining both sides of my road. They were not maintaining it anymore. They were preparing to widen it. And this time, they were aiming straight at my cabin. The first pine tree fell at 8:12 the next morning. I heard the chainsaw bite through the trunk before I reached the porch. The sound rose into a high metallic scream, then stopped. 3 seconds later, 40 feet of pine crashed across my yard hard enough to shake dust from the cabin rafters. Vanessa's crew had crossed the survey line again. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my phone, and walked toward the machines. The air smelled of gasoline, wet bark, and fresh-cut wood. A bulldozer idled beside the road while 2 workers dragged orange fencing toward my dock. "Shut it down," I told the foreman. He would not look at me. "We have authorization." "From whom?" Vanessa stepped from behind the grader wearing dark sunglasses and a pale blue jacket, that looked too expensive for a construction site. The board approved an emergency access expansion last night. Your board cannot approve work on my land. She removed her sunglasses slowly. This road serves hundreds of residents. Public necessity outweighs your personal inconvenience. Personal inconvenience. One tree was lying across the place where I had planned to build a workshop. Another had been marked with fluorescent paint 6 feet from the cabin foundation. I held up my phone and recorded everything. The machines, the workers, the cut survey ribbons, Vanessa's license plate. You're trespassing, I said. And now you're destroying timber. Her attorney, David Langley, emerged from a black sedan carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Cole, continued interference may expose you to liability if emergency vehicles are delayed. Then show me the easement. He opened his mouth, but Vanessa answered first. You were given a chance to cooperate. That sentence told me more than any legal document could. This was not confusion. It was pressure. They expected me to fold before I learned how much they had to lose. I called the sheriff's department. Deputy Aaron Pike arrived 20 minutes later, boots sinking into the torn shoulder of the road. Vanessa greeted him by name. That was my first bad sign. My second came when he glanced at the subdivision traffic and called the dispute a civil matter. I showed him the deed, the original plat, and the expired 90-day agreement. He studied the papers inside his cruiser while the grader kept running behind us. You should take this to court, he finally said. Until then, I'm not blocking access to an entire neighborhood. They're cutting trees on my parcel. He looked toward Vanessa. She gave him a small, patient smile. The HOA believes it has prescriptive rights, he said. You two need attorneys. Then he left. The grader moved forward before his taillights disappeared. Its blade peeled back the road shoulder, pushing gravel and black soil into a rolling wave. I stepped into its path. The operator stopped 6 feet from me. Diesel exhaust pressed hot against my face. Vanessa marched closer, her heels sinking into the mud. Move. No, you are threatening the safety of every family in Cedar Ridge. You build a neighborhood with no legal entrance. Her jaw tightened. We did not build it. We manage it. There it was, the first crack. She was distancing herself from the developer, even though her family had owned the land. I filed for an emergency injunction that afternoon. The courthouse clerk stamped my complaint at 3:46 p.m. By 5, Langley had submitted 47 pages claiming continuous, open, and necessary use of the road. They argued that decades of traffic had created a permanent right, even without a recorded easement. The judge scheduled a hearing for Monday. Until then, no one would stop them. That night, headlights swept across my bedroom ceiling every 20 seconds. Tires hissed over the widened gravel. At 1:17 a.m., a truck stopped outside. I watched through the dark as someone walked to my gate and stapled a white notice to the post. Unsafe structure. Vacate within 10 days. The notice had been issued by Cedar Ridge Architectural Compliance. They were trying to condemn a cabin outside their HOA. I tore the notice down and found a handwritten message on the back. Take the dollar. Keep the cabin. Let the road go. The ink was still wet. Then I noticed the security camera above my porch had been turned toward the wall. The camera had not failed. Someone had climbed onto my porch, loosened the mounting bracket, and twisted the lens toward the cedar wall. I could see the scrape marks in the paint and a muddy boot print on the railing below it. Whoever left that notice knew exactly where the camera pointed. What they did not know was that I had installed a second one inside the kitchen window. Its lens sat behind an old coffee tin, aimed through the glass at the gate. At 1:14 a.m., Vanessa's white Range Rover rolled onto my property with its headlights off. David Langley stepped out first. He wore dark clothes and carried the notice beneath his jacket. Vanessa followed him with a flashlight between her teeth. I watched her climb onto my porch, turn the camera, and hold the paper flat while Langley stapled it to the gate. Then she wrote the message on the back. Take the dollar. Keep the cabin. Let the road go. The footage captured her face clearly when the porch light flickered on. Her expression was not angry. It was afraid. I copied the video onto 3 drives before sunrise. One went into my truck. One went into a sealed envelope for the court. The third stayed inside the brass bell on my kitchen table. Years of surveying had taught me that evidence was useless if the other side could make it disappear. At 9, a blue pickup stopped beside the mailbox. The driver was an older man with a gray beard, a denim jacket, and hands shaped by decades of hard work. "You Ethan Cole?" he asked. I nodded. "Name's Samuel Price. I live in Cedar Ridge." He glanced toward the road before lowering his voice. "Vanessa told everyone you were trying to trap us inside the neighborhood. I'm trying to stop her from taking my land." I figured. Samuel handed me a yellowed photograph. It showed the eastern entrance to Cedar Ridge before the retaining wall collapsed. 2 lanes of pavement curved toward the county highway beneath a wooden sign. "I helped build that wall in 1996, he said. "It didn't fail naturally. The morning air seemed to tighten around us." Samuel explained that Vanessa's father, Harold Whitmore, had developed Cedar Ridge. The eastern entrance had been expensive to maintain because stormwater kept washing soil from the slope. In 2003, Harold ordered workers to remove drainage pipes during a storm, knowing the wall would fail. Once the county declared the entrance unsafe, he redirected traffic over Henry Briggs's private logging road. "Temporary access was cheaper than rebuilding," Samuel said. "After Henry died, they acted like the road belonged to them." "Why tell me now?" His eyes moved toward the subdivision. "Because Vanessa has been charging every homeowner $90 a month for road maintenance. 300 houses. 23 years. I did the calculation silently. Nearly $7.5 million. Where did the money go? That's what people started asking last year. The board records disappeared after the treasurer resigned." Samuel reached into his truck and pulled out a rolled blueprint. "I kept this. It was the original drainage plan for the eastern entrance, stamped by the county engineer. Rebuilding it would be expensive, but possible. Cedar Ridge was not landlocked. They had another legal route. Vanessa had simply chosen mine because it cost her nothing." Monday's hearing began beneath fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. Vanessa sat beside Langley in a gray suit, surrounded by 6 HOA board members. I placed my deed, the expired agreement, the camera footage, and Samuel's blueprint on the table. Langley argued first. He spoke about public necessity, emergency access, and decades of uninterrupted use. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Cole, are you asking this court to close the road immediately?" I stood. "No, Your Honor. I'm asking the court to stop them from widening it while we determine why they abandoned their legal entrance." Langley froze. Vanessa's pen stopped moving. I unrolled the blueprint. The paper crackled across the silent courtroom. For the first time since I bought the cabin, her face lost all color. The judge studied the county stamp, then turned toward her attorney. "Mr. Langley," he said, "why did your filing claim there was no alternative access?" Vanessa leaned toward him and whispered something I could not hear. But I saw the truth in her eyes. She was no longer fighting to protect a road. She was fighting to keep 23 years of fraud buried beneath it. The judge's temporary order hit the clerk's desk at 11:08 that morning. No widening, no tree removal, no construction within 20 feet of my surveyed boundary until the easement dispute was resolved. I watched Vanessa read the first page while Langley whispered into her ear. Her fingers tightened around the paper until the corners folded. For one clean second, I thought the order had stopped her. Then she looked across the courtroom and smiled. It was the kind of smile people wear when they have already decided the rules no longer apply. By the time I reached Blackwater Lake, 2 county vehicles were parked beside my cabin. Red inspection tape stretched across the porch. A building official named Curtis Hale stood near the chimney with a clipboard, while Vanessa watched from her Range Rover across the road. "Anonymous complaint," Curtis said. "Structural instability. Possible septic contamination. Unsafe electrical work." 3 separate complaints, all filed within an hour of the hearing. I showed him the HOA notice from my gate. "Cedar Ridge has no authority here." "This isn't HOA enforcement," he replied. "These are county inspections." The distinction sounded rehearsed. He photographed a harmless crack in the chimney mortar, tested an outlet, and stared at the cabin's foundation like he was searching for permission to condemn it. I followed him from room to room, recording every word. The cabin smelled of damp cedar and cold ash. His boots left black mud across the floorboards Walter's father had installed by hand. "You'll need to vacate until we finish reviewing the complaints," Curtis said. "Under what code?" His jaw shifted. "I'll provide the citation in writing." "Provide it now." He refused. That was when Vanessa lowered her window and called across the yard. "You should have taken the dollar, Ethan." Curtis pretended not to hear her. "I did." Curtis handed me a notice ordering me to vacate within 48 hours. My injunction protected the road, but not the cabin. It was a clever move. Push me out, isolate the property, then continue using the road while I fought another battle. I packed one duffel bag, locked my documents in the truck, and drove to a motel 12 miles away. Room 214 smelled like bleach, stale cigarettes, and an air conditioner burning itself alive. Trucks groaned along the highway outside. I sat on the edge of the bed with Samuel's blueprint spread across my knees and felt the first real weight of what I had stepped into. Vanessa had the HOA board, a lawyer, county contacts, and 2 decades of practice hiding facts inside official paperwork. I had a deed and a truth nobody wanted disturbed. At 10:36 p.m., Samuel called. His voice was barely above a whisper. "They know I gave you the blueprint." "How?" "Vanessa came to my house with 2 board members. Said I violated a confidentiality agreement from 20 years ago." A door slammed behind him. He stopped talking. "Samuel, they're threatening a lien." My wife's scared. I told him not to contact me again unless he felt safe. He apologized before ending the call. The apology hurt more than the threat. The next morning, Langley filed a motion accusing me of harassing residents, blocking emergency services, and manipulating an elderly homeowner into stealing HOA property. Samuel's blueprint was now listed as a stolen confidential document. They were turning every witness into a criminal and every piece of evidence into misconduct. Then Denise from county records called my motel room. "Someone requested the same files you did," she said. "Who?" "David Langley. He arrived with an order claiming the originals were needed for litigation." My hand tightened around the phone. "Did you give them to him?" Silence. Then the rustle of paper. "I gave him certified copies. The originals stay here." "But Ethan, one page is missing from the 2003 file." "Which page?" "The final page of Henry Briggs's temporary access agreement." I remembered the handwritten signature and the November expiration date. I photographed it. "Good," she said, "because the index says there were 2 attachments, not 1. An hour later, she emailed me a scan from an old microfilm backup. The missing attachment was a termination clause. If Cedar Ridge continued using the road after November 30th, 2003, every unauthorized crossing triggered a daily access fee payable to Parcel 17B's owner. The amount was handwritten beside Henry's initials. $500 per day. 23 years of traffic had not created a free easement. It had created a debt, and Vanessa had just tried to destroy the page proving it. $500 a day sounded small until I multiplied it by 23 years. The number on my calculator stopped at $4,198,500. That did not include interest, timber damage, unauthorized improvements, or the money Cedar Ridge had collected from homeowners to maintain a road it did not own. I stared at the screen while the motel air conditioner rattled like loose bolts in a coffee can. Vanessa had spent weeks treating me like a stubborn cabin owner standing in the way of progress. In reality, her HOA had been crossing my land on borrowed time since 2003, and every sunrise had added another $500 to the bill. I called a property attorney named Rachel Monroe. She had spent 15 years handling easement disputes for farmers, utility companies, and rural landowners. Her office smelled like leather, printer toner, and burnt coffee. She read Henry Briggs's termination clause twice, then leaned back without smiling. "This is enforceable," she said, "but collecting 23 years may be limited by statutes and prior ownership. How much can we claim?" "Enough to make them listen." She tapped the microfilm scan. "More importantly, this proves their use was never hostile or adverse. They entered under permission. Prescriptive rights usually cannot grow from permission unless that permission was clearly revoked and the owner was openly defied." I placed the expired agreement beside it. "Henry revoked it automatically." "Exactly." Rachel's eyes sharpened. Their entire easement argument just collapsed. We spent the afternoon building the counterattack. First, a demand for unpaid access fees. Second, damages for the trees and widened shoulder. Third, an injunction requiring Cedar Ridge to restore its legal eastern entrance. Fourth, an accounting of every dollar residents had paid for road maintenance. Rachel also subpoenaed county reimbursement records, HOA bank statements, contractor invoices, and communications between Vanessa, Langley, and Curtis Hale. "Do not close the road yet," she warned. "Let them keep using it." "Why?" She slid a legal pad toward me. At the top, she had written one sentence. Every crossing after formal notice is knowing trespass. The next morning, a process server delivered the demand package during Cedar Ridge's emergency board meeting. Samuel later told me Vanessa read the first page aloud, laughed, and called it extortion. She stopped laughing when she reached the amount. At 2:17 p.m., Rachel received Langley's response. The HOA denied the termination clause existed and accused me of fabricating the microfilm scan. At 2:42, Denise emailed the county's archive certification, complete with the real number, date stamp, and chain of custody record. At 3:05, Langley withdrew the accusation. The silence after that felt better than shouting. I returned to the cabin under Rachel's advice, despite the county's vacate notice. She had discovered Curtis Hale never filed an inspection report. No code citations. No laboratory results. No engineering assessment. Just red tape and a verbal order. When I pulled the tape from my porch, it tore with a dry ripping sound that carried across the lake. Vanessa was waiting on the road. "You're violating a county directive," she called. "There is no directive," I replied. "There's only your complaint." Her face hardened. "You think an old piece of paper gives you control over 300 homes? No, the deed does." I lifted the brass bell and rehung it beside the kitchen door. The metal struck the cedar with one clear note. Vanessa flinched. That evening, I installed 2 steel posts at the edge of the road, both inside my surveyed boundary. I mounted cameras, motion lights, and an electronic counter that recorded every vehicle crossing Parcel 17B. I did not install a gate. Not yet. I wanted proof of traffic volume before the next hearing. By midnight, 187 vehicles had crossed. By sunrise, the number reached 264. Each license plate appeared on a time-stamped log. Delivery trucks. Board members. Vanessa's Range Rover 6 times. At 7:11 a.m., a school bus rolled through carrying 23 children. Then an ambulance followed it. Vanessa had claimed closing my road would trap the community, but the county dispatch records Rachel obtained told a different story. Cedar Ridge's emergency plan still listed the abandoned eastern entrance as its official route. The retaining wall had been repaired with public funds in 2011. The road beyond it was usable. Someone had simply installed a locked decorative gate and planted hedges across the pavement. I drove there with Rachel and found Vanessa's initials stamped on the gate permit. She had blocked Cedar Ridge's legal entrance herself, forcing everyone across my land while charging them for the privilege. Rachel photographed the lock. I brushed dirt from the old pavement beneath the hedges. Fresh tire marks ran underneath. Someone had been using that road in secret. And when I checked the camera mounted on a nearby utility pole, its red recording light was blinking. The utility camera belonged to the county transportation department. Rachel found the asset number stamped beneath the housing, then called the records office before Vanessa could reach it first. By noon, we had 6 months of footage. The files arrived on a secure link, each clip marked with a date, time, and vehicle tag. I watched from Rachel's conference room while rain crawled down the windows. The first recording showed Vanessa unlocking the eastern gate at 5:43 a.m. Her white Range Rover slipped through, followed by a landscaping truck carrying Cedar Ridge logos. 10 minutes later, she locked the gate again. The next clip showed David Langley using the same entrance. Then Curtis Hale. Then a county maintenance vehicle. They had known the road was usable. They had been using it whenever they wanted privacy. Public necessity, Rachel said quietly. That lie just died on camera. The footage revealed more than secret access. Every Thursday night, a box truck entered through the eastern gate and stopped near the abandoned clubhouse storage building. The company name on its side matched one of the road maintenance contractors listed in Cedar Ridge's financial reports. According to the invoices, that company had resurfaced my road 3 times in 5 years for a total of $684,000. My road had never been resurfaced. It was still gravel. Rachel froze one frame and enlarged the truck's license plate. That contractor dissolved 8 years ago. The payment records led to a mailbox company registered under Vanessa's maiden name. The HOA had not merely collected money for a road it did not own. Vanessa had been paying herself through a dead contractor, then using the hidden entrance to move boxes of records after dark. We contacted the State Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Maria Torres arrived at my cabin the following morning in an unmarked sedan. She wore plain clothes, carried no visible badge, and listened without interrupting while the brass bell moved softly in the wind above us. I gave her copies of the invoices, camera footage, access agreement, county reimbursements, and vehicle logs. She studied the numbers, then looked towards Cedar Ridge traffic rolling past my porch. Do they know you have this? They know I have the road documents. Keep it that way. Torres wanted Vanessa confident. Confident people destroyed evidence, threatened witnesses, and made phone calls investigators could track. My job was simple. Behave like a landowner preparing to close a road. Rachel served formal notice that all tolerated access would end in 72 hours unless Cedar Ridge accepted 3 conditions: restore the eastern entrance, pay documented damages, and submit to an independent financial audit. Vanessa responded within 20 minutes. She rejected everything. Then she announced an emergency community meeting to save Cedar Ridge from an extremist land grab. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed that evening. I stood at the back beside Samuel while Vanessa spoke from a raised platform beneath an American flag. Her voice trembled with carefully measured outrage. She told residents I wanted millions of dollars. She said I planned to install toll booths, block school buses, and prevent ambulances from reaching elderly homeowners. People turned toward me with fear burning through their faces. Then Vanessa made her mistake. There is no other road, she declared. There has never been another road. I raised my phone. The projector behind her flickered. Rachel had connected to the presentation system from the side aisle. Vanessa's slides disappeared. In their place appeared the county footage of her unlocking the eastern gate. A timestamp glowed beneath her Range Rover. The room went silent except for the projector fan. Another clip played. Langley entered. Then Hale. Then the box truck. Samuel stepped forward holding the original drainage blueprint. She lied to all of us, he said. Voices erupted. Homeowners demanded bank records, invoices, and explanations. Vanessa lunged for the projector cable, but Detective Torres stood from the front row and showed her badge. Leave it connected. Langley slipped toward the exit. 2 investigators blocked the doors. Vanessa's face turned the color of wet concrete. For the first time, she looked at me without contempt. Ethan, she whispered, we can settle this. I heard the brass bell in my memory, one clear note against Cedar. You had 23 years to settle it. Outside, heavy engines rolled through the darkness. Not police cars, county road crews. They were heading toward the eastern gate with bolt cutters, excavators, and in order to reopen Cedar Ridge's legal entrance before sunrise. And back at my cabin, the electronic counter kept climbing toward its final number. Torres had not come to the meeting alone. While Vanessa was speaking, the county attorney was obtaining an emergency order declaring the eastern gate an unlawful obstruction of the recorded emergency route. The eastern gate came down at 4:18 in the morning. Steel screamed against steel as the county excavator tore the decorative columns from their concrete footings. Floodlights washed the old pavement in white glare. Workers cut through hedges, cleared 23 years of roots, and uncovered 2 full lanes beneath the soil. By sunrise, Cedar Ridge had a legal entrance again. School buses used it first, then delivery trucks, then every resident who had spent the previous night demanding answers from Vanessa Whitmore. At my cabin, the electronic counter stopped at 18,642 recorded crossings. Rachel printed the final log, sealed it with the camera footage, and carried it into court 3 days later. The hearing room was packed. Homeowners filled every bench. Reporters stood along the back wall. Vanessa sat beside David Langley, but the distance between their chairs told me their alliance was already breaking apart. Detective Torres sat behind an assistant attorney general with 3 evidence boxes at her feet. Judge Harland entered, looked at the crowd, and warned everyone that one outburst would clear the room. Nobody moved. Rachel began with the deed. Parcel 17B. My 6 acres. My lake frontage. My road. Then came Henry Briggs's 90-day permission agreement, the termination clause, and the microfilm certification proving it had existed since 2003. She explained that Cedar Ridge's use began with permission, which destroyed their claim of hostile possession. When Langley stood to object, the judge raised one hand. Mr. Langley, your original filing stated no alternative access existed. Rachel placed a still image on the screen. Vanessa unlocking the eastern gate. That statement was false, the judge continued. Langley swallowed. We relied on information provided by the board. Every face turned toward Vanessa. She did not look at him. Rachel moved to the money. 23 years of maintenance fees. County reimbursements. Payments to a dissolved contractor. Transfers into accounts linked to Vanessa's maiden name. The numbers appeared one by one until the total crossed $3. $1 million in suspected diverted funds. A murmur spread through the room. Samuel sat behind me holding his wife's hand. Vanessa finally stood. "This is character assassination," she said. "Those funds were used for community purposes." Detective Torres opened the first evidence box. Inside were ledgers seized from the clubhouse storage building after the meeting. Each payment had been handwritten beside initials, dates, and private account numbers. Vanessa's initials appeared on nearly every page. The judge ordered her to sit down. She remained standing. "You don't understand what I protected," she said. Her voice cracked against the courtroom walls. "Without that road, property values would have collapsed." "So you stole mine?" I asked. Langley turned toward me. "Mr. Cole, let him answer," the judge said. Vanessa stared across the aisle. The polished confidence was gone. No cream suit. No perfect smile. Just a frightened woman realizing every shortcut had led back to the same room. "Your cabin was worth nothing when we built Cedar Ridge," she said. "We made that land valuable." The words settled into silence. Rachel did not need to argue after that. Vanessa had admitted knowledge, intent, and entitlement in one breath. Judge Harlan ruled that Cedar Ridge possessed no easement across Parcel 17B. He permanently barred the HOA from using, widening, maintaining, or representing my road as community property. He awarded damages for the felled trees, the destroyed survey markers, unauthorized construction, and legal fees. The access penalties were limited by law, but still reached $612,000. Cedar Ridge would not pay them. The HOA's insurer would then pursue the board members who had concealed the agreement. As the judge finished, 2 state investigators approached Vanessa. The metallic click of handcuffs was softer than I expected. Langley stepped away from her before they touched her arms. Curtis Hale was arrested that afternoon for falsifying inspections and accepting payments. 3 board members resigned before sunset. The remaining residents voted to dissolve the old HOA leadership and place the finances under independent control. I returned to Blackwater Lake after dark. The road beside my cabin was empty for the first time since I bought it. No headlights crossed my ceiling. No tires hissed over gravel. I walked to the property line and closed the new cedar gate I had built from one of the pines Vanessa ordered cut. The brass bell hung at its center. I pulled the rope once. Its clear note traveled across the water and disappeared into the trees. Vanessa thought the road gave her power over my land. In the end, that road became the evidence that took everything from her. For the first week after the ruling, silence felt unnatural. I kept waking before dawn, waiting for headlights to sweep across the bedroom ceiling or tires to grind over gravel beside the cabin. Nothing came. The only sound was water moving against the dock and the slow knock of pine branches against the roof. Peace had returned so quietly that I almost did not trust it. Cedar Ridge reopened its eastern entrance permanently. The county rebuilt the drainage system, repainted the lanes, and installed a public sign where Vanessa's locked gate had stood. Residents voted in a temporary board led by Samuel Price and 3 homeowners who had never held office before. Their first decision was to publish every financial record online. Their second was to eliminate the road maintenance fee Vanessa had collected for 23 years. Their third was to apologize to me. Nearly 100 residents signed the letter. Some wrote short messages beneath their names. "We should have asked questions. We believed her. We are sorry." I did not blame them for using the road. Most had purchased homes believing access was legal. Vanessa had built her power by making ordinary people afraid of becoming her next target. Fear kept them quiet. Routine kept them compliant. And every passing year made the lie look older, stronger, and more official. But age does not turn theft into ownership. Paperwork does not turn intimidation into law. Rachel negotiated the final settlement with the HOA's insurer. The damages covered my legal bills, the destroyed trees, the survey work, and restoration of the land. I used part of the money to rebuild the shoulder Vanessa's grader had torn apart. The rest went into repairing the cabin. I leveled the porch, replaced the chimney mortar, rewired the kitchen, and built the workshop where the first pine had fallen. I used its lumber for the doors. Every time I touched the grain, I remembered the sound of that tree hitting the ground and Vanessa telling me public necessity outweighed my inconvenience. That tree became the strongest part of the building. Curtis Hale pleaded guilty to official misconduct. David Langley lost his contract with Cedar Ridge and faced a disciplinary investigation for filing statements he knew were false. Vanessa was charged with fraud, evidence tampering, trespass, and conspiracy. She eventually accepted a plea agreement that required prison time, restitution, and the surrender of several properties purchased through accounts connected to the fake contractor. The white Range Rover was seized. I saw it once at the county impound lot, dust coating the hood, the vanity plate removed. It looked smaller without her standing beside it. Samuel and I became friends. On Saturday mornings, he came down to the cabin with coffee and whatever repair project his wife wanted him to avoid. He helped me rebuild the dock. I helped him organize the new HOA's property maps. We marked every boundary clearly, recorded every easement properly, and made sure no future board could hide behind missing pages or verbal promises. One afternoon, he asked whether I regretted buying the place. I looked across Blackwater Lake. The sun was dropping behind the trees, turning the surface copper. The brass bell hung from the cedar gate, its green metal polished clean except for the old engraving on the back. Not for a second, I said. The cabin had never been the problem. The road had never been the real problem either. The problem was a woman who believed repeated use became permission, authority became ownership, and silence meant surrender. She was wrong about all three. I still allow emergency vehicles to cross my land when weather makes the eastern route unsafe. The agreement is written, recorded, limited, and signed by both sides. No hidden clauses. No assumptions. No $1 tricks. Just clear terms between neighbors who understand that respect begins where someone else's property line does. Most evenings, I close the gate before sunset. The latch lands with a solid steel click. Then I ring the bell once and watch the last light disappear across the water. I bought a lake cabin outside the HOA because I wanted freedom. What I found was a road, a buried agreement, and 23 years of corruption. Vanessa thought power meant taking what nobody had the courage to defend. I learned something different. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is an old survey pin in the dirt, a forgotten page on microfilm, and one patient man who refuses to move. The road was theirs only because everyone believed it was. The land was mine because the truth said so. And in the end, the truth was the only authority that mattered.